Our technology expert, Allan Hoffman, is back with us today. First, I got to ask you, do you play Angry Birds?
I don't play, but my kids do. I don't understand it. I have to rely on them for it.
I'm on the same page. But what you're here today to talk about is technology startups, and pretty much with a free Wi-Fi connection and a computer, you can start up your own tech company.
That just about. I mean, the bar is really so much lower for startups these days. It used to be 10, 12 years ago during the first dot-com phase. Companies would be out for $500,000, $1 million before they even started to try to get something together. Now, you hardly need anything to get one out.
You needed investors, you needed capital. That has gone by way of the dinosaurs to a certain degree.
Pretty much. What's happened is, right now, if you have, maybe you need more than a Wi-Fi, but you can have a lot of services that are out there for collaboration, for communication, and you can use all of those services very cheaply, and you don't need an office. You might outsource to other places. So the bar is really a lot lower, and there are now these lean startups or ultralight startups where people are coming out with these products, and then they're perfecting them over months, and they don't need all of the investment that they used to need.
But you still need some capital. I guess instead of 20, 30 million, maybe we're talking about 20, 30,000.
Right, exactly. I mean, obviously you need some money. You need to support yourself as you are making a go of this. So what's happening is there are now some things called startup incubators, and these companies, they are investment firms. They will have companies apply to them, and then they'll have sort of like a class. It's almost like a college class of 10 companies. They'll give them $10,000, $15,000 to develop an idea over 3 months, 6 months, see if they can make a go of it with that little amount of money and a couple of smart founders. And some of those companies actually end up making it pretty big.
You mentioned lean versus ultralight startup. Could you clarify what you mean?
Sure. The ultralight startups are the ones that are really using no investment whatsoever outside of maybe friends and family, credit cards, things like that.
Can you give me an example of a startup company?
Sure. There's one called Curious that is doing QR codes for events. And so they've got it going without like lots of outside investment. You can now build these tools with, let's say if you have a marketing expert and you have a technology expert, with some of the tools they can build it and get it out the door, and they don't need tons of investment.
Is that kind of like the app industry? Is that how it developed, the same kind of?
Some of them. There are definitely a lot of apps out there that were developed by just maybe a lone developer, maybe 2 developers. Then there are other ones like Rovio with Angry Birds, where they have a much, that's a big startup with lots of money.
They have their own lingo, I understand. You mentioned something called pivot. What does that mean?
Right. One of the strange things that's happening here is sometimes you have a startup with some really smart founders. They get a product out the door, and then they realize it's not really working quite like they want it to. Their customers aren't satisfied. And then they'll say, okay, let's pivot. We were aiming for a market of college students. Now we're going to go for small businesses. And this is one of these terms that startups have, that they're going to pivot into another arena.
How successful are these startups, technology startups? Do you have any percentages of success rates?
I don't have percentages, but clearly, 99% of them go down the tubes, frankly. I mean, a lot of these companies, they just go down the tubes. But then you have some, like, there's one called Posterous, which was founded by an incubator. It was recently acquired by Twitter for, I don't know the exact number, but many millions of dollars.
Acquired by Twitter, enough said there.
Exactly.
There's an interesting little success story I was reading about that a company, Gannett, bought. And these guys were doing what they call digital signage. And the billboard industry is huge, and it's a lot of manpower to change a billboard. Well, now they've made them digital so that you can program them from the laptop. You change the advertising, it feeds the billboard. Now you don't need those guys with the painter outfits you see up there changing. You can do it from a laptop. And some company was doing elevators, and Gannett, they put these little screens in elevators, and Gannett bought their company for some ungodly amount of money. And this is happening across the advertising industry, I imagine across a lot of other places as well.
Right.
One final thing I want to ask you, any startups that people might be interested? I'm hearing a little bit about Pinterest, which I can't quite figure out myself.
Right, Pinterest, it's actually really fun. It's simple. You just pin photos on a sort of online pin board. Photos, people do fashion, people do technology. You pin your photos there, and that's all it's about. And it's got something like 10, 15 million users already.
Well, that's a success, but most fail. Allan Hoffman, we thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Good.